We are live, and your voice is part of the conversation from the very first minute. I'm Jeremy Horn, also known as the Product Guy, and this is TPG Live, where product thinkers at every level come together. Whether you're leading a team or just getting started, this is your space. From interns to CEOs, startups to global giants, every voice matters here. This isn't just a live stream, it's a real conversation. Jump into the chat right now. I'm watching it live, and your questions and insights will shape where we go. If someone on your team should be here, send them the link. There's still time to jump in. We're just getting started, and the most surprising part of the conversation is coming up fast. Today, the on-camera portion of our roundtable is joined by Beth McHugh, who is a product strategy leader and trusted advisor to early and growth stage startups. She works with mission-driven teams to uncover real demand and align products to what customers truly need. Beth was the first product hire at LearnZillion, where her jobs to be done research helped shape the company's direction and ultimately contributed to its acquisition by Imagine Learning. She brings over 15 years of experience leading product strategy, UX research, and customer discovery at companies like CEB, Custom Ink, OpenMind, and more. She holds a computer science degree from the University of Richmond and is a Global Social Impact House Fellow at the University of Pennsylvania. We're also joined by Dan Ballant, who is a UX researcher with a passion for making research actionable, especially in industries where it's often overlooked. He founded the UX research function at his last company, embedding a culture of user-centric design and leading global design thinking workshops. Dan is now at a private equity insights firm where he explores how research can drive innovation in complex, data-rich environments. And finally, we have George Chaubinu, who is a seasoned product and program leader with executive experience at companies like Google, Sunglass, and Uyola. He's currently the founder of Human Software, where he's building Eloquence, an AI-powered tool that eliminates hallucinations through user verifiability. At Google, he led election interference prevention efforts and law enforcement integrations, managing 5 teams and over 30 engineers. George has created the #1 plugin on Bubble with over 1 million installs and a clinically proven app for smoking cessation. He holds a computer engineering degree from McGill, has interned at Microsoft, Google, and Facebook, and teaches innovation inside Google's own leadership programs. Today on TPG Live, how do you plan for the unknown while staying open to new ideas? And what does it take to lead with imagination and resilience at the same time? Join us in the chat room and at the roundtable as we discuss all this and much more coming up next on TPG Live. Before we get started, quick reminder. You can support The Product Way on Patreon and enjoy some amazing benefits. For less than the price of a coffee, and you know how I love coffee, you'll get access to real-world PM strategies and case studies, tools designed to help you solve your toughest challenges and elevate your career. Looking for even more? Higher tiers unlock exclusive benefits like one-on-one mentoring, resume feedback, shout-outs, and priority access to premium resources crafted for product professionals like you. So join us at patreon.com/theproductway to support the show and keep the content you love coming your way. Now let's get started. Your go-to platform for all things product management, connecting you with industry leaders, trendsetters, and a global community of insights and unique perspectives. This is The Product Way. Hello. George, Dan, Beth, hello. Welcome to TPG Live. Did I leave anything out?
All sounding good to me.
All right, thumbs up likewise. Or nods and thumbs and everything all around. That's what we like to see. All right, so let's get started. Let's start with a simple kind of question of the show to get to know each other better, to kind of get the ball rolling here. And today's question of the show is, what's the weirdest piece of product advice you've ever followed? And I'm just going to go in the order that I see you all stacked in our nice product person totem pole on the right. Dan, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I put quite a lot of thought into this and was thinking about, what's the weirdest piece of product advice I've ever had? I think for me, it was quite early on in my career. Someone gave me some advice to let's test our half-baked ideas with the loudest critic as soon as possible, essentially. At the time, I was really scared. I remember being like, this idea is going to get torn apart. But I think what I learned from testing those ideas, particularly the sort of half-baked ones with internal subject matter experts, was that it helped us to identify early on what wasn't going to work. And I think that really shifted my perspective on what it is to design a product, because I think that quite often it's about learning what won't work enough times until you end up with something that will work and will provide value. So I think from that, my lesson is that failure and learning what won't work is an inherent part of that journey towards success.
Excellent. Beth.
So I had a hard time also thinking about something that was weird, but I was thinking back to a time where I was newly a product person. I had just come from Marty Kagan's training. This is a good chunk of time ago. And I wanted to build a product vision. And I was told I don't know who it was at the time, but someone was like, you could use a comic strip. And I Googled a comic strip, and you could put these people on it, and you could put thought bubbles, and I made one. And maybe if it was executed well, it would have been good. But at the time, I was pretty new to the role, and it wasn't really a vision. It was just a timeline of something, and it was very uninspiring and very weird. So I think I made it weird. It might not have been the weird advice.
I came across at one point a comic book about some agile superhero. And so they would hand it out as a tool to teach people agile. I don't think anyone read it, but we all handed it around as something just goofy that we came across.
Yeah, I think
George,
they're there, but it didn't work out.
Yeah, no, I like the idea. I really like that. George, you're up.
Yeah, thank you. So that's such a cool idea. I love it. But the weirdest piece of advice I got was essentially, and it's going to sound very strange, but don't trust your users. And so I've seen this both sort of doing the experiment myself, but also it's pretty well established in the literature. So if you give a limited set of resources to users to vote on features that they would like to see on the roadmap, they vote very differently when they have to essentially use up some even a fake point system than if you just ask them to just rank things however they please without any restrictions. So when you ask them to pay to put some sort of monetary or mentally monetary currency at stake, they suddenly may change their mind, and the true priorities seem to arise.
You just take their credit card and say, I'm going to start charging until I get the right answer. All right. Awesome. So for mine, the weirdest piece of advice that I've ever followed, I think it was pay more attention to what you're not hearing. As product people, we're passionate about passion. So I think it's very common for us to just love enthusiasm, that cheerful feedback, the excited user, stakeholder energy. Someone told me, though, very early on, that the loudest feedback is rarely the most important. It's the silence that'll sink you. And so it's teams rarely panic over features that quietly fail. Users don't complain when they stop using your product. Stakeholders don't follow up when they stop caring. Now, when I look at product, I don't just ask who's happy, I ask who stopped talking, who disappeared. And it's the silence. It's the signal every PM really needs to learn to hear. And it's saved me from many, I guess you'd say, invisible failures along the way. So that's my little bit of weird advice, was to listen more for the silence. So with that said, let's go into our first topic of the show. And our first topic is all about fostering. Our first topic is all about fostering curiosity and creativity, cultivating innovation in product teams. Because really, at the end of the day, innovation doesn't just happen. It's the result of team culture that rewards curiosity, supports creativity, makes space for exploration. So what I'd like to do now is as part of this our roundtable, and I'd also like to just reinforce whether you're on camera with us or on camera part of the roundtable or off camera joining us through YouTube, LinkedIn, or somewhere else that I might have clicked the random button to make this whole thing stream to. Feel free to jump in on the chat, ask questions. And I will do my best to work them into the larger conversation. So post your questions. If they're all based on the topic, I'll get them worked in pretty quickly. If not, we'll still do our best to get to those questions, and we'll do our best to help as many folks as we can as we go through this. So it starts with a mindset. So curiosity is often the fuel for breakthrough thinking. How do you, Beth, foster curiosity on your product team?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when I was new to the product world, I thought I was supposed to have all the answers, and learned throughout my career that that's you actually want to have that intellectual humility and know that you are often wrong. So my biggest thing, like now I'm out on my own, but when I was both out on my own now working with clients and when I was in product teams, for me, it's all centered around the user, the customer, and interviews. Any way that you can get to the heart of being in their shoes. And I do think that there's a craft. Like everyone says, talk to your users, talk to your users. But I've listened to people who've talked to their users, and I work with people who talk to users, and sometimes they're just validating their own ideas. And so there is a way to be talking to users so that you are talking 20% of the time and your users are telling you the stories 75% of the time, so that you are getting at what's really going on, what journey they're really going through, the struggle moments that they're really having. And that unlocks so much more if you're able to have a lot of those stories and dig deeper. So that's huge for me personally when I work with teams, and then also just when I was in teams working with UX designers and especially bringing in developers into the room. It just it unlocks so much when everybody can more deeply understand what is going on.
Dan, same question to you.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, Beth stole most of my answer there.
I know we align on a lot of things, so.
I will just massively echo that last point that, I'm a big fan. I think as a UX researcher, you can be seen as the person that has the keys and has the answers because you are that person that has the connection with the users. But I think it's super important to take people along on that journey with you. Product managers, designers, like Beth said, I've had such fruitful experiences when we bring developers along on that journey because, I think traditionally they can be a group of people that are quite disconnected from the people that we're actually solving problems for, that we're building products for. And actually, in one of my last roles, I used to work for a company that we created software for the automotive sector, specifically for car dealerships. And I'd bring developers along to the car dealerships to see people repairing cars and using the software that they were going to build. And you can just see things click into place, and the quality of work that comes out of the back of that, I think, dramatically improves as well. So, yeah, that would definitely be my number one tip for fostering creativity: is bring people along the way and share that journey.
It's great advice. It's great advice. George, this next one's for you in that, creative environments rarely happen by accident. They're shaped by what leaders model and encourage. For you, what does a truly creative team culture look like?
Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. I think there's at least two interesting things. One is, how do you deal with failure? And the other one, I'll share it as a joke in a moment. But the most important thing is to understand that in order to generate something innovative, you have to do a lot of tries, and a lot of those tries will not be successful. And so if you as a leader punish people when they make mistakes, when they try something different, when they try something new, then that's guaranteed going to kill all innovation, because no one's going to try anything that's not already tested and done before. But in order to be different and to progress, you have to actually do things in a different way and foster that innovation. So I think one, how do you deal with failure? How do you deal with mistakes, right? And I think the second thing is it's a really interesting joke. So someone's walking around New York City and asks someone, "Hey, how do you get to Carnegie Hall, like the piano hall?" And the person answers, "Practice, practice, practice." You just need a lot of practice. I think people might think that creativity is something that comes naturally, and I'm sure it comes more naturally to some people than to others. But it's also like a skill that you need to sharpen, you need to develop, and you need to kind of like work on all the time. It's not just like, oh, I have one interesting idea. I have a ton of not so great ideas, but then eventually I have one good idea.
Wow. So I got 2 follow-ups for you there. So a lot of time I hear that, they always say, "Oh yeah, we don't punish people for being creative. Don't punish people for making mistakes." I think if you're saying that, that means that someone doesn't know how to not punish people for making these mistakes. Like, how do you create that environment where people feel like there's not going to be punishment or some sort of negative outcome?
So I can give you an example from Google. So the first team I was at Google was the site reliability engineering team, and so these teams are responsible for maintaining Google's infrastructure around the world. But you know what? Even at Google, accidents happen, and so like occasionally the system will go down. And so as long and then but this happens, and so some people have actually been promoted on the basis of after
of how many computers they can crash.
No, it was a big, essentially, but it was a very big, I think this is a famous story, but it was a very big, there was a very big crash for the Google servers caused by this one change that this person made. But they came out very quickly with a forward, like, "Oh, I think I know what's happening. Here's what the mistake was. Here's how I think we can fix it." And because they came forward very quickly and they were honest about it, we were able to actually fix the problem very, very quickly. Otherwise, it would have been much, much more difficult. And so the post-mortem, which is the analysis of why this happened, it doesn't even mention whose fault it is. Because in order for you to send your code to production, it has to go through multiple reviewers and multiple systems of review, so you can't just send whatever. So if the mistake happens, it's a very complicated mistake, or it's a very subtle mistake, right? That other people have looked at and they weren't able to identify. So it's not really your fault in that sense. And so the analysis is focused on like, what's the root cause? How do we prevent this? And how do we make sure that this mistake doesn't happen in the future, right?
I think that also points to a really good takeaway people can have when they're looking at, like, when people do like a retro at the end of a sprint, is instead of it being like, "Okay, Tom, you did it again," instead of it being that way, it's really more, I think, as you're saying, like, what's the root cause, but also like, let's just look to the future. Like, how do we want to prevent this, like, with a future facing outlook? I think that can be carried over into a lot of things, and then hopefully kind of seep into the culture. So maybe sprints are a good place to start with that sort of philosophy. Another thing that you said, though, George, was creativity is a skill to sharpen. How?
I meant it when I said practice. So there's books that make you do like creative thinking every day, one creative exercise every day. When you look at really any product, try to think about like weird ways to shift it around. For example, you can remove the wheels from a car. What do you get? Well, you get a flying car if you put jets instead of it. So there's all kinds of techniques and methods that sort of like people use consciously or subconsciously to generate these ideas. But essentially, it's like, if something that's innovative, it's a unique combination of things that exist. That's almost 99% of everything. Like truly new ideas are pretty rare. Then how do you come up with new ideas? You just do a lot of the stuff that like exists and you try different combinations of it, right?
So is there any particular process, book that you recommend for kind of honing someone's skill with creativity? I know a lot of very uncreative people. And so how would, like, I'm not that I'm saying a lot of lawyers, but a lot of uncreative people. And so where would be a good place for someone to, I guess, start if they just feel like they're good at regurgitating or kind of cleaning up whatever they're being handed, but they're not great at coming up with their own maybe unique ideas or unique takes?
I think there's and any one of these books, I don't like, I can recommend a particular one, but there's books that are about one creative exercise a day, for example, right? And they give you various prompts, and you're encouraged to answer that prompt as weirdly as possible. And they sometimes also provide very good examples. So that's like sort of like the initial step. And then I think if once you sort of get the habit of like mixing all of these ideas and all of these principles together, then you can learn about more fields of research, and more, specifically in your field of research, you can sort of like learn about more advanced techniques and try to combine them. So it kind of becomes like, I think, a skill set a little bit, it seems to me.
Gotcha.
To me, I'd kind of, what I'd say to one of your lawyer friends, Jeremy, maybe is, take a problem that they experience on a daily basis or weekly, whatever it is, right? And reframe that creative, ideation as problem solving, right? How can you creatively solve a problem that you experience? And I think by looking at yourself as the user that's going through that as well, you can very easily empathize with yourself, and probably come up with some creative solutions to your own problems. And I think all we're doing a lot of the time is doing that on the behalf of others, right?
All right, I'll pass the word on. I shouldn't have said lawyers. I'm sure that's gonna bite me.
I feel like lawyers have to be creative sometimes.
That's like, what I like. I realized that after I said that, but I committed. So
I will say that one book, like what George was talking about, if anybody's read the Sprint book, it like walks you through, I forget, it's like the Google Ventures Sprint book around. So there's like a crazy eights. So what you were talking about reminded me a little bit of the crazy 8 exercise. And I think you had you fold paper into like 8 sections. So I've done a lot of that with like creative thinking, trying to get out of the box. I mean, first you kind of need to have the foundation of what you're, ideating around, but the 1 minute per square, and then you can even reduce that to like 30 seconds and like just trying to like get quick ideas out.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on what Crazy 8 is?
Yeah, so it is basically you take a piece of paper like 9.5 by 11 or whatever it is, and you fold it, so that there are 8 squares, and there's a context to it. So you have centered around a how might we problem. So there is some context in terms of what problem you're trying to solve. You probably have some insights around like narrowing in where that is. And so everyone around the table has 8 squares, and you set a timer, and you have, I think it's 8 minutes. It might be less than 8 minutes to do 8 drawings of something to solve for that problem. And so it's like very quick thinking, and it's like no bad answers, just go. And there are some really interesting, it like sparks an idea that becomes something else. And so in the book, you kind of iterate on that, because you do another round where you kind of sketch on your own, and then you do another round to share with each other, and then sketch based off of that. And so there's like these rounds of iterating on that idea to get to something better, both collectively and giving yourself time, a little bit more time to think than that exercise. But it reminded me of that because it just sparks these like really weird ideas that you're like, it's weird, that's not going to work, but like there's a small aspect of that could work, and I'm going to take that idea. And so there's also that cross-team collaboration that can happen, which everyone thinks a little different, and on a great team you have diverse thinking and you can feed off each other.
Yeah, it's a really good idea. Like, I like that for idea generation. Are there other idea generation sessions that you've tried, George?
So this is a rule of brainstorming that I think a lot of people, this is probably the most commonly broken rule of brainstorming, that people don't necessarily understand why it's there. So like one of the rules in brainstorming is there's no, like, you shouldn't question anyone's idea, but you should sort of like bring an improv approach to it, which is yes and, right? So you build on top of ideas, and you use them as like a stepping stone towards a different thing and the next thing, and so like we can build on each other's ideas. what people don't realize is there is a stage when you can actually criticize ideas because you have to filter down, but there's two stages to sort of like idea generation. The first stage is divergent, and so the idea there is to just generate. So we're not going to put any filters, because with the filters now, we miss out on opportunities that we don't even know exist, right? So you just put no filters, you're very divergent, and then once you have a list of ideas, then you can start filtering down by specific criteria, which one's the most realistic, which one's the most likely to happen, or whatever criteria you need to have to actually fulfill those ideas.
Dan, I want to do the same question with you. What other approaches?
Yeah, I've got one that I wouldn't necessarily say is idea generation, but it's a great icebreaker or kickoff to any kind of ideation workshop, and builds on the ideas that Beth and George have touched on there. So it's called Bad Ideas. And as the facilitator, you're smiling, Jeremy, I feel like you've heard this one before, but you take a sticky pad, obviously, write a series of bad ideas on different post-it notes and hand one to each group in your session. So an example of a bad idea, the one that I always go to first, is like sandpaper socks, for example, or you could have like, the chocolate teapot is a classic one. Like ideas like products that really shouldn't be a thing, that make no sense, and you tell the team they are part of a marketing agency and they have got to find all the reasons why these products are fantastic products. So, sandpaper socks, well, no need to exfoliate your feet anymore.
I always thought it was the other way. I was thinking construction people might like them.
Yeah, roofers, that's one that comes up. Or one that I always loved was spaghetti shoelaces. That used to come up quite a lot. But I think it's just instilling that idea at the beginning of the session. There's no such thing as a bad idea, and really this is a safe place where you can let your mind go a bit crazy. And to George's point, when we're sort of converging later on in that process, you'll see like glimmers of those early crazy ideas that you had, and there's something really nice about seeing that, something that started off out here and now actually we're talking about something quite serious, but it came from a really silly place. So yeah, that's one that I always love.
Yeah, it's sandpaper toilet paper that you want to stay away from. That would be the bad use of that product. So we've kind of touched on some of this a little bit tangentially at this point, in that creativity falters if people don't feel safe. If they don't have that psychological safety. I know a lot of companies have done different kinds of studies along the way. But Beth, what have you found helps kind of build that psychological safety and openness in product conversations?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I think is these things happening in smaller spaces. So I was thinking back to all the times, we've been doing these types of things in the small groups. I think you can build a lot more safety and understanding and getting to know each other. So I think that's where the pod, like the product manager, UX developer pods, work really well in building trust, especially if, from my perspective, there's like customer discovery involved and basis of that. And I've also, getting to know people on a personal level. But I've joined in on like engineering, outings where they're in bowling and getting to know people just outside of work. I think is huge to be able to build that personal relationship and getting to trust each other. But I also say that I think there needs to be that space from like all the, I don't know if it's attention, but I was part of one project where it was like a company-wide innovation project, and I was leading it. And like the amount of energy that goes into communicating that and keeping everyone updated on that and like getting everyone's input on that takes so much away from the creativity and you just feel like eyes are all on you. And so I think the more you can have autonomy and like not have to update on everyone on everything and be able to have those failures and those cycles and that safe space away from like all eyes on you, I think that is huge. So I've been able to work with executives to be able to create that space and have that little pod that we've been able to just move without feeling like we have to have an end date and a product to deliver to get a little bit more space. And I've been reading a book. I just posted about it, The Illusion of Innovation. And it talks a lot about this idea of like, we are so focused on efficiency now that you move away from that space, that like innovation and creativity takes time and it takes space and it takes that failure and that like following weird pathways and like being curious about that. And I just think so much that can be hard to find sometimes, unfortunately. And so a big thing is just creating that space to be able to do that.
Yeah, and for folks listening, any books or articles or whatever that we mentioned during the show, we'll do our best to get them updated into the show notes afterwards. So yeah, Beth, if you send it to me, I'll get it worked in.
Yeah, I have a lot. They're all over my desk right now. Like if I actually pan my camera, it's like it's all over. It looks very clean right here, but it's books.
It's about I'm familiar. Same to you, Dan. It's an important question. I kind of want to see what everyone's take is.
Yeah, so I think one of the big things for me is making sure that, people feel like it's a safe environment to fail in. I know we've already touched on this, and I think, to some extent there's a time and place for failure as well. Like, and I guess part of my job is helping us to kind of fail faster as teams. So I think one of the big things for me is just encouraging, from a top-down approach, encouraging that experimentation and actually celebrating when things fail. I think, kind of to the very first thing that I said on this about the weird product advice, right? It's, you have to fail to get to a point of success. Or if you hit success first time round, it's probably not going to be that great or that innovative or that successful. So
what do you mean? What do you mean when you're saying celebrate when things fail?
Yeah. So
all the servers are down. Cake for everyone.
Well, what I'll say is, and this is why I said I think there's a time and a place. So I'm very much focusing this on sort of the, development of ideas and of new solutions, right? As opposed to things that are live and, mistakes can have serious impact. But I think it's about when we build an experiment, when we go out and we test that in the wild, and when we get, challenging feedback coming back, see that as a positive thing that we've been able to go through that process. We've been able to get that feedback so that we can act upon it and actually go back and try and make something better, right? I think, I'm always really dubious when we get great feedback first time. I think as a UX researcher, you really have to almost try and make those products or those concepts fail, like poke every hole you can in the ship, because if you get to a point ultimately where you've really tried to make it sink and it's not, then probably you've got something, more likely to be successful on your hands. And I think it can be, I think leaders have a big responsibility in that whole process, in ensuring there's time to jump through those hoops and not just be delivery focused on the first thing that we come up with, and also in enabling that culture of, you're allowed to experiment, you're allowed to try things out, and if it doesn't work, that's not a failure. That just means we tried something, and you know what, we learned from it, and now we can pivot and move on to the next thing or the next approach that we're going to try.
Yeah, I've always tried myself to just reframe it as not in the terms of failure, but these are lessons learned. And when I send out stuff to my peers on like the leadership team or elsewhere, there's a section about what we've learned within that unit of time, and it's made up of things that didn't work, but in making sure that when something doesn't work, we want to make sure we learn from it, and then percolate that around to all the other different division leaders, so that it becomes more of a shared knowledge there. George, same question to you.
Sure, thank you. So I think the scope of creativity is also important. There's, I don't know if your accounting department needs to be very creative. In fact, I think it's a problem if your surgeon becomes
accounting.
creative.
That's what I should have said. Not
There,
lawyers.
there are
Lawyers
some
are
places,
great.
there are some places where the risk of discovery is extremely high. So you only want professionals. So like there should be a specialist who does medical research, not your everyday surgeon who like decides to experiment on you doing like a regular sort of like surgery, right? And so I think it's important as leader but even as a team member, it's very important to understand that not everything is subject to innovation all the time, every time, always, right? There's limits to where you want to focus that energy. So there's certain areas that are more able to actually benefit from innovation. But if you're in a space where you only have 2 or 3 options and those 2 or 3 options have been explored, just make one of those 2, 3 options that's really good and just go with it. Because you think of any startup out there, they don't innovate on more than 1 or 2 directions at any given time, right? You don't innovate the UI and you innovate the backend, you innovate the marketing and you innovate sale. Like some stuff needs to stay constant. There's no way you can create, because in a company at any given time there's 1,000 different things happening. They can't all be innovative, so we need to very deliberately choose where we focus our creative energy.
Excellent. So I think when people think about creativity, they think of it as this magical spark, but it can be something that's really in everyone's daily practice. So if someone wanted to make their team more curious and creative tomorrow, what's one thing that they should go and try? And I saw Dan, I think, smile just a little bit wider there, so I'm going to go to Dan.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's a really interesting question, and yeah, something that we've definitely played around with in the various teams that I've worked in before. One of the things that I used to love doing, we used to have a 45-minute session on a Friday where we would pick a problem that was outside of the context of what we were doing, so completely detached from work, and just have a go at solving it as a team. And to Beth's point earlier, Crazy Eights were definitely involved. Just trying to go through like a super rapid, how do you go from like defining a problem, generating a handful of solutions, and working that down, in a super short time period, working that down to the point where you go, okay, well, there's maybe this that obviously if we spent a lot more time on, we could develop into a proper prototype or whatever to go ahead and test with. And again, what I'll say to that is it's really great to when we did that, we used to try and bring people along the way with us. So bring people outside of the product design team along on that process, so, more than anything, so they can watch and observe how we can come up with ideas and they don't have to mean anything and they can just fade away afterwards. But that's almost part of the magic of it, right? Is that things don't have to be attached to big pieces of work, or they don't have to be seen as highly valuable to it's. And again, back to George's point earlier, it's just flexing that design and that innovation muscle, so that you can more easily use it in your day-to-day role.
Yeah, George, what is one thing that folks could do tomorrow? They could go to their team. What's that one small thing they could do to help their teams be just that little bit more curious or creative starting tomorrow?
I think two sort of things. So it's a really interesting question, because we don't know how much of curiosity is sort of something that you're born with versus you can sort of like teach people. There's a little bit of research in that direction, but there's no definitive answer. But I think I think almost everyone is going to respond when you spark a sense of wonder. If you swim with a whale that's the size of a bus, or if you do skydiving, but everyone has sort of like their thing that they'll be amazed by, right? To some people it's religion, to some people it's technology, to some people it's music. So whatever it is, give people a little bit of inspiration, give people a little bit of like ideas of how to sort of like see something extraordinary, right? And in their field or in a very similar field to their field of expertise, just so that they get a little bit inspired. So I think that's one thing. And the other thing is maybe take it to an environment where it's safe to experiment and to fail. So maybe, if we work at a nuclear reactor, maybe we don't play around with the buttons, but maybe we actually come up with like we bring them. So, for example, one of the exercises we did is we would bring real like Lego-like components. So I forget what they're called, but like ConnectX or whatever. There's like all kinds of components, and so people are given an assignment and they can build something using those components, and it's so much fun. And people truly, people who don't think they're creative start playing around with stuff, and they realize that they can be creative if they're not afraid of anything. So bring it to a fun, inspiring, and safe space to experiment.
I don't know, if you're at a nuclear reactor, why not? Press a few buttons. Have some fun. Beth, anything you want to add to this?
Yes. So on like a micro level, I would say an interview, and in the form of, I tried my best not to say jobs to be done up until as long as possible. It's been 40 minutes, but I love leveraging jobs to be done. And the switch interviews, I would do a few switch interviews, which is identifying what made people switch. And the way that you can do these interviews gives ahas a lot of the time. If you really dig deep into why people are switching, there's a video that Bob Mesta is interviewing someone about a car and like buying the car, and just like digging down into it. It was like he found out it was like the IKEA trips and having a newborn baby that like is why, like, just pushed to like be able to get this car, and then recognizing the features of the car that were needed because they needed to fit a stroller now, even though his car. So there's so much that you can learn by understanding those moments that people actually make a switch to something different because the pain is so big, and that I find inspires and unlocks like new things and new thinking about go to market and all those other things. So and then the other thing that came to mind, I was at Custom Ink, and during the time where, if you know Custom Ink, it's online custom t-shirts. And it was during a time where we were exploring, so it was a while back, like 10 plus years ago, exploring in stores, like brick and mortar stores. And I organized a day with leadership and different people on product teams. And I had a customer success person, a person that talked to customers all day long and how they walked through people through the process. And we got to interview him and have different stations where we were designing a store and like the experience of the store. We had cardboard and paper and all these things. And so everyone got really tactile with markers and like built a store front, they had hangers and then we walked through that experience. So it was kind of putting yourself in a customer's shoes and designing the experience to, and they were a part of that. And so I think there was just so much fun that day, and we got to kind of reflect on like what worked, what didn't work, to eventually, I think, feed into the stores. I wasn't involved in that fully, but I was tasked to kind of do a design thinking exercise around that, which is a lot of fun.
That's great. That's really great. So that brings us now to our trivia segment. So everyone listening, we're going to go to the answer later. Right now, we're going to do the question. So if you happen to know the answer and you're in the chat room, resist that temptation of typing the answer. At the end of the show, we'll go into the answer. We'll see who knew it. We'll maybe have a little bit more fun information about it. But right now, let's get into the trivia question of the show. What type of chart is most commonly used to visualize how users drop off at each stage of a product experience, such as from form sign-up to activation to retention? Once again, what type of chart is most commonly used to visualize how users drop off at each stage of a product experience, such as from sign-up to activation to retention? All right. So hopefully, I'm looking around the room. I'm seeing more confidence than usual on my trivia question. So.
I am terrible at trivia, but I'm feeling pretty good about this one.
Good. That's what I want to hear. The terrible part. I mean, so that's great. So if you know the answer, cool. Don't type it. I'm just checking to see. Let's see. So one of the comments is interesting from need better glasses on my part. Hap Girl, I think it says. And they're adding that I find diversity within the product team can definitely help with creating different ideas and viewpoints. Different background experience can spark curiosity. And I think that's absolutely true. And that's always been a critical part of my approach to product teams.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think when people are hiring product teams, they're always like must have background in X, in like the the ed tech or whatever it is, and I'm always like, no, not everyone needs that background, because you need someone who's pushing up against that background. So
you actually want people
really
that don't have that background.
Diversity in the team too. Many other forms of diversity too.
Absolutely. Like when you're hiring, please. You gotta go outside of the space. If you're staying inside and then you're frustrated that you're only getting incremental improvement, that you're not having any breakthroughs, it's because everyone had 10 years of experience in ed tech. For this, using this example, you need that diversity of industry, of background, of just life perspective. Otherwise, you're looking at marginal gains, and you're not going to have any of that innovation or breakthrough that you're really hunting for. Look for people that can solve problems, and then let the rest of it kind of fall into place from there. So with that, let's. Anyone else have anything they want to add on this before I jump to the next piece? No. Yes. No. All right. So we're going to be talking about road mapping in uncertain times, prioritizing agility, risk management, strategy. Uncertain times. I don't know if anyone's ever is familiar with anything like that, but it might come in handy at some point. This kind of skill set in product, uncertainty isn't the exception. It's really it's the environment. So I want to explore how to build roadmaps that can flex and evolve without losing that strategic direction or that stakeholder trust. And so I thought we could kind of start with some of the basics, roadmaps or whatever you want to call a roadmap. I'll use a very broad definition of roadmap here as a core product management tool. Not everyone agrees on what they necessarily should be, but how would you define roadmap in the context of uncertainty? Dan?
Yeah, so I think, a roadmap in times of uncertainty, I think we often think about, defining roadmaps. I think that's a really key word to think about here. When you know that times are uncertain, how much can you define? I think it's about being aware of different things, different scenarios that maybe you're expecting, and almost preparing for different scenarios and different outcomes to those changing environments. And I guess continually assessing as well at different milestones. So, Horizon 1, Horizon 2, how are we pivoting our thinking and our roadmaps as different scenarios unravel or outcomes come true or not true? So I think, like I said at the beginning, I think the word definition there, or define, is interesting, because it's very difficult to define something solid when there is so much uncertainty. So yeah, I think preparing for different outcomes and continually assessing is the advice that I would give.
Gotcha. George, to you.
That's so interesting. So I have a very counterintuitive piece of advice, which is think long term. And the reason that's helpful is because when you think long term, it forces you to really filter out the noise. Like, what is it true that I know for sure? Like, what's true today that I know for sure will be true in 10 years from now, right? So this is, by the way, I didn't come up with this. This is from a really cool video that I'll send the link of from Jeff Bezos. But he was essentially saying, like, people will always want their shipping to be faster. Like, that's not going to change. They will always want the prices to go down. So there's some fundamentals that will stay unchanged. And so if you can distinguish what's important versus what's not, and the things that will stay true for a long term, and you still stay flexible and adapting to whatever happens, right? Like if AI knocks on the door, you don't stick to whatever you were doing before you adapt to AI knocking on the door. Of course, but force yourself to like think, if AI shows up, and what are the things that are still true 10 years from now, right? Like people will want certain things certain ways. So to me, that's always been very helpful.
Gotcha. So
Yeah.
Beth, go ahead.
Oh, I was just I agree with that point, and I think in terms of the long term, but I think about it in terms of the jobs to be done. Sorry to bring it up again, but because what people are trying to accomplish doesn't change. I think how you're accomplishing it might change based on new technology, based on things that are happening in the world, but like what people are trying to accomplish and how they're struggling. If you continue to focus on that, then like when these things hit, you're more adaptable to what's going on. And I'll just do a quick example. I worked for a physician education startup that was selling to hospitals when COVID hit. So, hospitals weren't really caring too much about general education of physicians at that time, or purchasing anything that was going to help physicians up their game. And we pivoted. We had been building a line to jobs to be done for physicians and building a really solid platform. And then when COVID hit, it was a question of, do we go after this? We know it's going to be short term. It had to be a conversation at the organization, knowing it's probably not going to be a long term bet. But we pivoted and were able to use our platform to have COVID information. And Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina partnered with us to provide that information for all the physicians in South Carolina to be able to get the latest information in COVID. So I think if you have that foundation, then when these things come up, there's ways to pivot to it where the product was very, very quick and easy tidbits of information, so it perfectly aligned to like the information that they needed at the time. So I was aligning with George, and I have multiple examples of how that can help.
Gotcha. Dan, how do you build that roadmap that leaves room for learning and adjustment without losing focus?
Yeah, I mean, I think to George's point, it's about identifying what are those things that are going to be stable, instead of focusing on those fixed features. What are those things that are going to be stable over long periods that that we can stay focused on in the long term? And I think having different buckets for different items on your roadmap can be really helpful. So looking at, what are we focusing on now? What are we looking at next? And what's, sort of that right now, Horizon 1, Horizon 2. I think that, again, feeds back into the idea of uncertainty and allows you the flexibility within your roadmaps to adapt depending on the environment that you're working in.
You mean, I think are you referring to kind of that more that now, next, later sort of format for a roadmap?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Have you used it much?
Not personally, no. I can't say that roadmaps are a massive part of my role in terms of creating them. I think that primarily where I'm concerned with roadmaps is ensuring that the research that we're conducting from the UX research perspective is inputting towards those items. So, we'll be looking at those roadmaps, particularly, looking ahead of time and going, right, there are these items on here. How are we uncovering those insights that are going to support the decisions that need to be made when that time comes around? So when we get to that point in the future of, okay, well, we're considering what needs to be cut from the roadmap, what are we taking forward? How do I ensure that there is insight and data that's come directly from our users to support those decisions that are going to be made?
So I'm a big fan of that format of a roadmap. But George, Beth, have either of you used that or something similar?
I don't know. I've already talked to George. I don't know if you want to step in. I'm happy to.
You got it. You got the floor.
Yeah.
George can wait his turn.
I was going to bring it. Yeah. Now, next, later. I love leveraging that as a roadmap because I think it helps you to be more adaptable, because I've been in situations where you're like, these are the exact projects we're doing in Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. And then when something comes up and it's like, we need to jam this in, everyone's like, just jam it in. And then you're like, you still have to do all those other things because nobody, it's like loss aversion. Like nobody wants to take anything off. And unless you have a real frank conversation of like, no, we cannot do all these things.
If you make the font smaller, it'll fit.
I know. Yeah. But like a more junior product manager that I was, you're just like, yeah, we'll make it work. Of course, that's small. And you think it's small and it's never small.
Developers love hearing that.
I know. I was computer science too, and I was like, I know code, and I'm like, I don't know code anymore, so I can't. I learned a lot over my career as a product manager and all the bad things that you can do, but it makes you a better person. Lots of failures got me to where I am today. But I think the now, next, later is perfect because you're saying next, you're saying later, and then something comes up and you're like, is this our now or is this our next? And it's a very easy conversation of like, it can only one thing can be now, or, one big thing can be now. So I love that as like a framing of the main things we're working on. Obviously in Jira, there's more things than that. And like, there's more levels of specificity, but I'm a big fan of now, next, later.
George, did you have something you wanted to add to this?
I have nothing to add to this.
Well, I want to know now, have you used it or not used it? Are you for or against?
I haven't used it. This is why I don't have a lot to add to it. It sounds like a very powerful way to simplify things. But like I said, I haven't used it, so I have nothing to add to the conversation.
So we'll just stare at you anyway. No, I'm kidding.
I'm all for it.
I wanted some controversy here, but there was none.
No, so while I like it, I've always found that in my meetings it doesn't work. Within my team, sure. I think we're kind of I'm generally running the product org, and so that's they already have that kind of mindset, and so it works. It gives everyone a lot of flexibility, it gives people a lot of autonomy. But once you bring it into the C-suite, it doesn't. People need dates. I don't think they do, but they feel they do. And so a now, next, later is usually a bit too ambiguous. I think, and I'm talking more, and that perspective I'm sharing is more from the enterprise level. I think if you're working in a startup world, everyone's going to be a lot more flexible. Everyone's going to be it's going to be a lot easier for everyone to kind of get along and go along with that sort of way of thinking, because things are going to change week to week and things are going to be a lot more dynamic.
I will also say that the tech leader, the CTO, I think is big also in like no dates, like until we have like very defined things, because of it's so hard to get an exact date and you're going to be wrong unless you know exactly what you're building. And so I think having people also along with you, like partners around that is really helpful, because I've been in situations where it can't work. You have to have dates and you're like pressured for dates. But it was more in a startup that we had a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah, I think I was originally introduced to the whole now, next, later thing through ProdPad. I don't know if they're still around anymore, but I really liked a lot of what they were doing at that time. So risk, like we can't avoid risk, duh. So you have to manage it. And so George, the person, he who does not use now, next, later, or hasn't used it, not saying that we all really have all that much either, but what I want to say is, so how do you incorporate risk management into your roadmap, your planning cycles? Like, how do you structure it if someone's is taking some fast and furious notes right now and wants to implement some of these ideas?
So I think almost everything can be measured a little bit. It can, like you can sample the future to some extent, right? And so you can sort of gauge the level of uncertainty you have in a particular situation. So what all of this fancy is just to say, try a little bit of stuff, like experiment a little bit. If you're not sure about a direction, try to talk to a few customers in that direction, or try to look at competitor analysis. you're probably not doing everything from truly from scratch. Someone has been there in one shape or another, has been, as Beth likes to say now, because now we know, it has had to do that job, right? So how had people performed that function before? And so that, if you look a little bit outside of the sort of your own scope, and you look for source of data outside of your own sort of company's perimeter, it's almost guaranteed that you'll find some sort of proxy, some sort of information that can give you a few data points and can help you ascertain a little better what their level of risk is. And then everyone has a risk tolerance. Everything has some level of risk. It's just a matter of understanding exactly how high it is and knowing that we take it, right? And so the question is not, do you take a risk? Everyone takes risk all the time. Crossing the street, driving, everything is a risk. But the question is, what kind of risk are you comfortable with, and what kind of risk is does the expected value, when you multiply this with the value that you expect, is it actually worth doing it? Because some risks are not worth taking, and you can do that math beforehand to some extent.
So Dan, how do you incorporate risk management into your road mapping and planning cycles?
Yeah, so I think I'll approach it from slightly the other side about, my role within that. So, to build on what George is saying there, I think inherently there's always going to be risk when we're talking about building new things, right? I think it's very much the role of a UX researcher in that environment to contribute towards de-risking that, or, where possible. So I think as best as possible, it's about trying to identify what those biggest risks are early, and testing it out, experimenting, getting feedback on those ideas, or on those risks. I visualize it in my mind as every risk we take, or every assumption that we hold, for example, is a brick in the wall. And I always think you want to test the wobbliest and lowest brick, and that is the risk that we are either, or the assumption that we're most unsure of and is most critical to the project, and that would be my number one assumption or risk to try and avert first. Because if that brick comes out, if we prove that assumption to be incorrect, or if we if that risk comes to light, then that whole wall is going to crumble down. So yeah, I think my role, like I say, within that is about identifying those risks early and trying to follow a sort of data-led approach to help those teams really understand what the risks are. Because I think that's the other side of it is, how do we quantify those risks when everything is just sort of unknown? How do we actually say, well, this is a bigger risk, or this is lower risk? So trying to input data into that to help those teams make the decisions that they need to.
So how do you quantify the risk? You knew that question was coming.
So I think, in my intro, I mentioned that I've always worked in B2B environments. And I think inherently there are a number of challenges that come with accessing your users in that space. So with that in mind, so take that into context with my answer. I think oftentimes I find it really useful to rely on subject matter experts. So combining insight that we hopefully have already gathered from our users with subject matter experts to validate the solutions and concepts that we've come up with before then hopefully doing another round where we can go out to external users is really helpful. I just base it as much as possible on the evidence that we can access. And again, my role in UX research is about de-risking those concepts. So ensuring that we've got enough, ultimately, we've got enough positive feedback to support an idea to the point at which we feel comfortable taking it forward, that really it's going to, when we release it, it's going to be something that delivers real value is what we're all trying to deliver, right? So input would be my answer. And ideally, if you can get that from real world users, thumbs up.
Anyone else have any kind of, I guess, magic equations or approaches or formulas when they're kind of assessing risks that they can kind of quantify it or get their arms around it a little better and make decisions off of it?
I'd say it's hard to quantify, but I think it depends on what type of organization you're talking about, that the risk is different. So like when I work with early stage founders, you are talking about like their hypotheses and like the risk of that being wrong. And so I map out with them like, okay, what are your outcomes that you think you're going to achieve through this? What do you think their users' outcomes are and what they're trying to achieve from it? And let's talk about what are the risks. Let's map out your idea of an MVP and what are the risks with this? And like one of the risks is like nobody will ever use it, or nobody will ever buy it. Like very basic risks of, and so we talk about experiments to de-risk that, and that could be the false wall. Like, can we even get people to sign up for something? Can we, or it's the interviews and seeing like how people are making. Is this a big enough struggle point that they're going to look for a solution here? But then, different when it gets to larger organizations, because you're talking about risk to what you're deploying, and the impact of the users. So I think there is how many users will this impact? Can you de-risk it by reducing the amount that so I've done like rollouts when we did a full, this is a while ago. It was a mobile, like we were not mobile friendly. It's a very long time ago. And we were rolling out like the first mobile friendly piece, but we wanted to start small and like build up from it. And so we had a very low percentage on that, and seeing how many people would save their design and like check out with a design like that. And we were able to measure, okay, with that very tiny percent, I think I was like percentage points of people that we put on that who were accessing, because people were accessing it for the mobile phone and like clicking and pinching and designing t-shirts. And so we were able to measure like how much is that impacting the checkout and save rate, to then see, can we continue going in this direction? And we were actually surprised when we did that first experiment that it was a lot closer to the save rate than we thought. And it was very minimal amount of functionality on there. And then the other thing, I think this ties into creativity, because if you're so risk averse as an organization, you're going to lose the creativity. And I did love when I was at Custom Ink, it was e-commerce. You could put something out there and like, we had an analytics person that would be like, something is wrong. You need to roll that back immediately. So there were measurements in place to, even if you did something terrible, like the risk was lower because they could recognize it pretty immediately within like 12 hours that is always the next morning. I would, the woman would come into my office and be like, what did you guys do last? Did you do something? Did someone else do something? Like what happened here? And roll it back.
Gotcha. No, those are good.
So
yeah, go ahead.
I think what's interesting is, and I'm going to start from a different spot, but we'll get to risk in a second. So, people, when they disagree, they usually disagree for two types of structural reasons. One is that they have different information or different assumptions, right? Like, I think this object is green, you think it's blue, and we're talking about it, but we never check those assumptions. And then once we figure out the assumption is wrong, we fix it, and then we agree. The other one, and this is where risk comes in, the other kind of disagreement is sort of like on innate things. So like, you actually just like red and I just like green. Or to me, a 20% risk chance of doing action X is extremely risky and extremely scary. Whereas maybe to Jeremy, it's just like a yawn, right? He's like yawning past that risk. So like, that's also like a little bit of a personal preference. So some people will look at the exact same amount of risk. Some people will look at two people can look at the exact same amount of risk and see it from a very different perspective, right? If I'm an elderly person who is like at risk of fracture and like very hard to heal, to me walking on an icy surface seems like a lot scarier than to someone who's like in their teenage years, right?
I'll concede that, yes.
So I think it's always useful to understand if a lot of things boil down to fundamental things, and a lot of times in a company, especially the larger the company or the larger the stake, the more it comes down to whoever makes the final decision. How do they think about this amount of risk? Do they see the real size of it? Do they see the downsides? Do they not see the upsides? So risk generally has 4 components, right? So like you have the worst case scenario and then the probability of that happening, and then you have the best case scenario and the probability of that happening. And then if you add those up together, it should give you some positive expected value. And so, you know, if people can be sort of shown those values and can be made to understand that those values interact in a very simple way, usually they tend to be rational and be like, okay, well, it's worth taking a chance or not.
Mm-hmm.
What? So
I have a story to add to that.
Go for it then,
Yeah,
because
sorry.
I was going in a few different places just then, so I'll organize.
So then
my
you can
thoughts
collect
while
your
you go.
thoughts while I tell the story. I would completely agree with that people think about risk in 2 different ways. I worked with a founder who was very passionate about the mission, which I love, and wanted this one feature, and was very passionate about getting this feature out there, and that there was no off switch to this feature. And I knew the buyer, who was not the end user, and that the buyer, some buyers were in for it, other buyers did not want the end user to have this functionality. And so I like approached him and was like, I think this is very risky, and encouraged him to talk to the end users. And he didn't end up doing that, but they found out through other channels that it was ended up being a risk. But I do think, you know, leveraging data to make sure everyone's on the same page with what is the risk, and figuring out what is risk versus what is, you know, people's just aversion to things, is important too. So you're on the same level playing field.
Gotcha. Dan, I'm gonna go to you for the next question. In that, as things change, especially you're managing risk, you have to be dynamic, especially in these elusive, uncertain times. Maybe we'll experience them someday. What strategies have you found help maintain alignment when you have to make a lot of these changes with the leadership team? What's worked for you? And I think I'm even more curious, what hasn't worked that you've tried?
So, you know, again, I'll say that I'm probably not best placed for this, because feeding into roadmaps is more where I would sit, as opposed to communicating and standing up for those roadmaps. But I think one of the things that's really important is those constant syncs, you know, constant feedback of where we're going, the decisions that we're making, and why. And, you know, I'm very biased here, but I feel that when things change, if we can attribute the voice of the user to those decisions that we're making, I think that can be incredibly impactful. So if we can define the impact of decisions that we're making on the roadmap against evidence that we have at a user level, and if that can be reported back to, you know, leadership or even board level, I think that can be very impactful. You know, saying, look, we've gone down this path, we've learned this thing, and actually, off the back of that, we're changing the way that we're approaching things. So that's one of the things I'd say. And I think back to, you know, the whole topic of this conversation really is just ensuring that you're communicating yourself in a way that doesn't come across as being indecisive or flip-flopping, but really showing that it's, you know, I guess kind of framing that as risk reduction. So actually, you know, as opposed to us being scatterbrained and we don't know what we're doing, we're actually acting in a very agile way, and ensuring that our roadmaps reflect the risks that we're aware of at this moment in time.
George, what has worked for you, and what should, and maybe not what hasn't worked for you, but what should people avoid doing when trying to align with leadership? I know that's a very large set of answers, but
goodness, that's an interesting question. let me give you the positive answer first and what I think about the negative one. So I think on the positive side, try to always frame things in the perspective of the people you're talking to. So one example, in the legal compliance team, there was the engineering team and there was the legal team. So one of them were engineers, the other one were lawyers, and they could never trust each other because engineering was always off with their estimates. And so I had to step in the middle of that sort of situation. And what happened is, it turns out that the legal team never understood that if you make changes to like whatever you sort of like told engineers, you have to wait for those changes to happen, and there's a cost, and then that will delay the project. And so to speak their language, I went with a literal contract to them. I said, anytime you induce a change, if that change is more than X%, then this is gonna shift the. So you kind of have to speak.
Oh no, they're gonna hold you to that contract now.
Yeah, and it's a joke. They appreciated it. They appreciated it, but you know, I think it really helps to speak to really understand the perspective of the person that you're speaking to, and understand, you know, if it's a sales director, then they're going to be really focused on the numbers. If there's someone in the legal department, they're going to think about legal risk. So make sure you try to phrase things in their perspective, from their perspective a little bit.
Speak their language.
Exactly.
So wait, what do you recommend for the flip side of that? What have you seen people do, or you've done, either way? You blame it on other people. That doesn't work. That's worked against the cause of aligning with leadership.
I think leadership likes to have the decision, and so you can make a recommendation, but if you bias things too much, they become a little suspicious. So that's like a bad idea. Don't go with an answer. Trust that they will have some really useful insight. And be ready that they might change their mind. Most people, I think, when they go, they kind of have a decision that's made, which is good, but you also have to expect that they're not necessarily going to go with that. And so that's one thing to do. And I think the other thing is I guess make it boring, because if it's an important decision, and you don't want people to really listen to the details, like make it super boring, and they're not going to listen to it, and then you can do whatever you want. But if you know, it's the famous bike shedding, but it's inverting that. So the bike shedding is, you know, people debate, and this is true, like debate in enormous amounts of time for like what color the bike shed should be when, you know, this is a nuclear reactor or a space launch or whatever. So if you want, like, you know, if you really want to be evil, just do a little bit of that. Make it a very boring topic, and at the end say, and this could also like have this insane risk, but no one's going to reach there.
I found that the biggest mistake I've seen people make is they spend all this time kind of coming up with this. They do lots of research. They come up with lots of reasoning. There's a lot of really good thought that went into what they're pitching, what they're trying to explain. But at the end of the day, if you're talking to a senior team, keep it short. Less words. The more senior you go, the larger the company, less words you use. Anytime I've seen this everyone's just going to glaze over, you're going to just get cut off because no one has time for this. Tell me where you're going. A lot of the people in that room have so much more knowledge than you can imagine already that they're working with. So just cut to the chase. Tell them what the conclusion is. Why are they there? What decision do you need them to make right then? And then you can kind of, if there's some additional information, you can provide it. But a lot, if you're in a well-functioning org, you've sent them that material ahead of time, and they've probably done their homework. So less words as you go up. The biggest mistake I've seen is too many words. I want to, as we kind of wrap up this topic, there's one more question I wanted to explore, and I'm just going to go around for this one. In that, what is one mindset shift or habit you think PMs need to make to succeed in uncertain times? Beth, let me start with you, and then we're going to go right around.
Yeah, I mean, you threw me off with the in uncertain times at the end of that, so I'll answer it without that ending.
I got to work on my sentence structure.
So I love talking about intellectual humility because early in my career, I thought I was supposed to have all the answers, and recognizing that there's like the you don't know, and being open to being wrong, because I think it could be super frustrating when the PM thinks they have all the answers and they try to push back with their answers. So I think that is holistically a trait that I think all PMs should have. Definitely have a stance and have a perspective on things, but not so strong of a perspective that you're not listening to your team, you're not listening to external parties, you're just going straight with your idea. And in certain times, I think that might still apply, because you need to be open to what's happening in the world and what's happening on your team, and being able to react to that. So I guess my answer would still be the same, but you definitely threw me off with the in uncertain times piece of that question. So I'll leave it to others, and I'll see if I can come back with something else.
Here, watch this. I'm going to be dynamic here. In uncertain times, Dan, what's one mindset shift or habit you think PMs need to succeed?
I'm massively going to build on what Beth just said. I think, admitting that you don't know all the answers, and not holding yourself, to a high standard in terms of having to know those answers. I think really what you could say is, it's about shifting from trying to predict every outcome and trying to control every decision in that moment, to sensing what's going on and responding in that moment to those changes in the environment that you're seeing. So stay curious, keep learning, and keep adapting to those learnings that you make along the way.
George, anything to add?
I think I actually will build on what both Dan and Beth said, which is
too much consensus. Disagree.
Lose your ego. Lose your ego. No, a good idea is a good idea. What I mean is, I think a lot of PMs, or at least I definitely had this idea that all the ideas have to come from me and all the good ideas have to come from me. And I think the moment you realize you're a catalyst, you may have your own ideas, that's great, but for the most part, you just collect this brilliant pieces of diamond from everyone around the company, and you put them together, and you have the privilege of presenting them back to everyone else, whether they come from users, whether they come from your colleagues. If you learn to truly be a listener and not just have your own ideas, and really admit when someone else has a better idea, and you take that idea and you push it forward, I think that's the true sort of nirvana of product management, when you're you just transcend yourself, and you remember that your job is to bring the brilliance of other people to the table.
Ooh, I want in on this, and to build on all of that.
You just felt left out. You just wanted to jump in.
I wanted to hear your answer too.
I just would add that as product management evolves, as things, as we all look towards what the future of product management is going to be looking like, I think that also speaks to uncertain times, in that it's about being a facilitator. It's not about being an answer person. It's about wherever the best ideas are, wherever that expertise may lie within the organization, as the product person driving that North Star. It's about helping everyone kind of shine and be their best, and kind of get the right pieces together into that pile that you call a product strategy. And so I kind of look at it, I see product evolving kind of almost into this coaching facilitator role, as opposed to that answer role that I think it might be how many of us thought about it 25 years ago, dating myself there a little bit. And that I think the way you think about it now, the way you think about it, especially as people try to figure out how is the field going to be evolving, it's think of it as a coach, as a facilitator, about bringing all the right people together at the right times, and getting the best out of everyone, and kind of coaching everyone in that skill set, and bringing all those ideas together. So if people do have other questions, or feel free to drop it in the comments as we start to wrap things up. We're going to go into the trivia answer part of the show now. But just as a quick refresher, the question. What type of chart is most commonly used to visualize how users drop off at each stage of a product experience, such as from form sign-up to activation to retention? Once again, what type of chart is most commonly used to visualize how users drop off at each stage of a product experience, such as from sign-up to activation to retention?
All right. If I put that up, you can't see Beth. All right. Go away, question.
Right, you don't need to see me. It's fine.
All right. Beth, since I put the words on your... there she is. There you go.
You gotta sit on my leg.
Lower. Okay, now you can rest. Beth, answer?
So I learned this, if I'm right, in 2006. Is it a funnel?
I will accept that answer. Dan, George, was that your answer as well?
I was going to go with a cow chart.
Wait, what?
A what?
A what
go
chart?
Ahead, Dan. Oh, I was going to go with it for a cow chart. I don't know. Just sound like, yes, funnel is the right one.
Is that like the scientific explanation of a funnel?
No, but I just thought milk or cow sounded more funny. Funnier.
Oh, joke. Because I just Googled
I
cow chart, and all I know is the different cuts of meat now. So I'm like, cow chart. Wait, I'm learning something. What is this? Oh man, you just sent. Now I have all the wrong stuff on my screen. So yeah, a report by User Guiding suggests the average completion rate for SaaS product onboarding is around 55%. There's a Mixpanel blog post on user onboarding that acknowledges the broader challenge of user retention and stating that most apps only retain around 20% of new customers. There's one chart product teams rely on when they need to understand exactly where users are dropping off from sign up to onboarding to activation and beyond. It doesn't give you answers, but it tells you where to ask the right questions. And as everyone has correctly identified, it's a funnel chart. I always called it a funnel chart. I never just said funnel.
Funnel.
But
funnel.
All right.
Maybe making a funnel cake.
All right. I'm learning new words. I learn new words every time. I learn new ways to say things every time I do a show.
Funnel.
A funnel. All right. I'm just going to call it a cow chart from now on and just let everyone stare at me like I'm a crazy person. So let's see. I don't see any comments there, but everyone was just so amazed by the trivia question. I'm sure they all just shouted at their computer and forgot to type it. So anyway, we've had such a smart panel here today that they all got the trivia question. Finally, 100%. I told you it was going to. It was going to. No, you're just jinxing the next panel now, next month. So with that said, I just want to kind of go around the room, see if anyone has any final comments here. So let's start. I'm going to just go in order where I see folks on the screen. George, any final comments, and also tell people how they can get in touch with you, find you online.
Sure. Let's see. I think 2 comments. One of them is, if you want to be creative, don't just imagine that you have to be creative or you don't. You just put some real work behind it and you will be creative. There's some amazing science about that. There's a lot of research. There's a lot of really inspirational videos out there about how to do it. So don't ever feel like I'm not creative or I'm not good at math or whatever. Put some work behind it and you'll get good at it.
If you've got some references, send them to me after the show. I'll add them to the notes.
Yeah, it's if you look up on YouTube, Ira Glass Storytelling, he has an amazing little video for 2 minutes. I'll send it to you. So that's one of the videos that I watch every now and then when I feel a little bit discouraged. So that's a very inspirational video. And then I don't know. A fun fact is both myself and I play. My wife and I play Overwatch, which is a first-person shooter, but kind of cartoonish. And so if anyone wants to play with us on a team, we're more than happy to. We play competitively online quite a bit. So yeah, so that's all I have to say. I'm very easy to reach. I'm George at human.software. That's my email address. That's the domain that like I have an app at. You know, it's partially ready now, but once it's ready, I'm gonna do a bigger plug. But human.software, you can sort of play already with a really cool analytics app if you're into analytics.
Awesome, great. Dan?
Yeah, not a lot to add really. I will just say one thing, and again, just builds on.
Well,
what
don't
George
forget
was
to tell
saying.
people how to find you online as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, George, you said, what did you say earlier? You said something along the lines of maybe there are studies into like, are people born creative, or are people naturally more creative than others? And I think, again, just to build on what you've just said, I think everyone can have that creative streak, and one of my favorite things I've experienced in my career has been being in the room with those people that you don't see being creative every day, and getting a bit weird and a bit wild with them in that workshop setting, and seeing them come alive and explore ideas in a really creative way. So I truly believe that every single person has it in them. Sometimes it's just about enabling that or facilitating that to come out of them. So yeah, encourage you all to try and bring some creativity into your workplace for sure. Thank you very much for having me on this panel. It's been great chatting with everyone, and yeah, thanks everyone that tuned in. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to chat with anyone that wants to learn more about UX research, is thinking about hiring a UX researcher on their team. Please reach out to me with anything like that. I'd be more than happy to chat through anything.
Outstanding. Beth?
So I know we talked a lot about creativity and ideation, but a big piece that I'm super passionate about is I've talked about jobs to be done and like customer discovery, and making sure that ideation is happening with a foundation of really deep understanding of where there is demand, because I think there's a lot out there that is pushing supply, like here's my idea, now let me go find the market, as opposed to finding a struggling moment and an opportunity in the market to then build a product, or improve your product, or change your product strategy. And so I just want to dig into that a bit more, and if that excites you, because it excites me, and it's something I learned a lot in the startup world. I think people get very excited about ideas, but you really need to have that foundation. So if you're interested in speaking more about that, I have a lot of books that I recommend on jobs to be done. I speak a lot about jobs to be done to help find that market demand. So there's lots of posts on my LinkedIn if you want to find me and connect. I just asked to put a message in the LinkedIn, so I know that you're from this chat, and we'll connect with you, but would love to talk more there. Or my site is tilta.com, TILLTA, for Tilta Consulting. So interested in working and collaborating with folks as well.
Outstanding. No, that's great. So any links, any extra references, I'll be sure to get into the show notes the next day or two, maybe even tonight. Nah, that's not happening. So I'll get it into the show notes. If you have RSVP'd, you'll definitely see all of that right away. I just want to thank everyone who joined us on camera, our special roundtable: George Chaubanu, Dan Bellant, and Beth McHugh. I hope I said those names better this time.
Got mine. I've gotten McHuge, McHug, so you got it right. That's good.
My daughter would have liked that one, McHug. I just want to thank all of you here on camera, everyone who joined us in what I call kind of the off-camera part of our roundtable. Just really appreciate the engagement, the questions, the comments. It's really what makes TPG Live and what we do here special. It's that roundtable conversation. It's all people engaging all over the place, and I think we covered some really interesting stuff here. Everything from learning about a couch chart, the crazy eights, brainstorming bad ideas, bringing your improv chops to ideation, a skill that is very underappreciated, I think, in product management. And so everyone just really, really great takeaways throughout the conversation. Really smart takes here. And if anyone would like to join the roundtable, we'd love to hear from you. So every person, every background, every experience is welcome. You just have to have a strong point of view and willing to speak up and say it and express it. And so for that, contact me at jhorn@theproductguy.com. And I or someone else will be in touch with you. We're always looking for new topics. So there's so many topics to cover and so many different perspectives we can take. So if you have an idea for a topic, drop it in the comments below. We'll take a look and explore it for a future episode. And also, I've got a favor to ask. If you're watching us, if you enjoyed it, or heck, if you're still around, still watching, click like, subscribe, enable notifications, and tell 5 friends about the podcast. If you have a coworker who you know would benefit from this, who who you thought should attend this time, or you'd like to see them attend a future show, pass along the link. Tell them about TPG Live podcast. Tell them about the Product Way YouTube channel. It really helps us grow, and also helps other people learn, which is really what we're here for. And once again, just really thank you all again, the on and off parts of our roundtable. And I'll see you all next time on TPG Live. Bye.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in. Just one more time, I want to share how you can support this show and gain access to exclusive career-changing resources. For less than the cost of your daily coffee, you'll unlock actionable product management strategies and case studies, proven solutions to real-world challenges, all delivered ad-free. Want to take it up a notch? At $15 a month, you'll get a personal shout-out in an episode and your name in the credits, a great way to showcase your support for our global product management community. For $25 a month, you'll gain priority access to exclusive events, detailed case studies, one-on-one resume feedback, and toolkits tailored to enhance your product management expertise. If you're ready to go all in, subscribe as a product leader and enjoy personalized mentorship sessions and exclusive insights to elevate your career to the next level. Your support makes it possible for us to keep delivering insightful content and building this amazing community of product professionals. So please, head to patreon.com/theproductway and choose the level that's right for you. Every contribution, big or small, makes a huge difference. Thank you so very much for your support.